Good morning, this is Dr. Hiba Ghannoum, Lecturer of Audiovestibular Medicine, ENT Department at Helwan University. Today is our first lecture in otology and it's an introduction to hearing and equilibrium. The ear has two main functions, hearing and equilibrium. Equilibrium means the act of maintaining one's balance. السمع والاتزان. To start, we have to go back to some physics and some basic definitions. What is sound? These are waves of compression and rarefaction of molecules that pass through a medium. Compression يعني إيه؟ Molecules packed closely together, and the rarefactions are the areas in between. Why do we say through a medium? Because sound cannot pass through vacuum. The density of this medium is the most important factor that will determine the velocity of sound. The more dense the medium, the faster the sound through this medium. That's why, in contrast to light, the velocity of sound in solid is higher than in liquid than it is in gases. Characteristics of sound. How do we define the wavelength? Wavelength is defined as the distance between two successive peaks or two successive troughs. In other words, it is the distance between the exact same point on two successive cycles. What about the frequency? Frequency is the number of cycles repeated per second. As we can see in this diagram, high frequency, high number of cycles per second, low frequency, fewer number of cycles per second. When we are describing sound in terms of the physical properties of sound, acoustics يعني, we use the term frequency. What about when we are talking about the psychoacoustics, the psychological perspective or the perception of sound? We use the term pitch, low pitch or high pitch, and low frequency or high frequency. And this is usually confused with علو الصوت. Frequency has nothing to do with علو الصوت. It's الحدة بتاعة الصوت. Harsh sound or soft sound. صوت حاد أو صوت غليظ. Frequency is measured in hertz, and the human hearing, the range of human hearing ranges between 20 to 20,000 hertz. The ears are most sensitive to the frequency range 2000 up to 5000 hertz. What's the relation between the wavelength and the frequency? The higher the frequency, the shorter the wavelength. Back again to the diagram. High frequency يعني إيه؟ يعني number of cycles كبير. Wavelength is the distance between either two peaks or two troughs. The higher the frequency, the shorter this distance between two successive peaks or troughs. What about amplitude? Amplitude is the extent of vibration from the position of rest to the point of maximum displacement or the furthest point. This determines the loudness or the intensity of sound. Again, زي ما قلنا في frequency والpitch, when we are talking psychoacoustics or describing the psychological aspect of sound, we use the term loudness. Whereas when we're talking acoustics or describing the physical feature of sound, we use the term intensity. Intensity is measured in decibels. What about the wave form? The pure form of a sound wave is the sine wave or the sinusoidal wave, whereas there are secondary waves that affect the wave form of the sound. And that's exactly why when we have two notes, a piano note and a guitar note, we can both having the same frequency and the same intensity, we can differentiate the two sounds from each other. We have earlier mentioned the two main functions of the ear, hearing and equilibrium or maintaining the sense of balance. Now the structure of the ear. Ear is composed of external ear, middle ear, and inner ear. So now we know the sound, these waves of compression and rarefaction will enter the ear, causing vibration of the structures of the outer and middle ear. So we're talking here about which form of energy? We're talking about a mechanical form of energy. In order to hear, discriminate, and comprehend what we hear, we need to transmit this signal, this mechanical signal, up to the level of the brain. So we need to transform this mechanical energy into another form of energy that can be further utilized and processed by the brain. This means that we need to transform the mechanical energy into a neural signal. This whole process is called auditory transduction. So now we can divide the mechanism of hearing into four main steps. Number one, the transmission of sounds along the outer, middle, and inner ear. This is followed by stimulation of receptors at the inner ear. Then transmission of the neural impulse up to the auditory cortex. This is also called the auditory pathway along the central auditory nervous system. And finally, discrimination of sounds by the auditory cortex. These four steps will be further explained in details by the next otology lecture. Thank you for your attention and best of luck.